In the last section, we made a little change to our code base, and the result was that whenever we called this update name function with a string of Jimmy, it appeared that Jim was successfully updated. So we're now going to break down this code and talk about exactly what we were just doing. So the first thing I want to do is talk a little bit about what this ampersand operator right here is, and what this star or asterisk operator down here is. So let's talk about what those operators are, and then that will probably help us get a little bit more familiarity with what the code is actually doing here. Okay, so first we'll talk about that ampersand thing. The ampersand is an operator. We place the ampersand and then some variable name. And so that's exactly what we just saw in our code base, where we put ampersand and then the variable Jim. Ampersand Jim. Now when we do that, we are saying, look at this variable and give us access to the memory address that this variable is pointing at. So in other words, if we have ampersand Jim, Jim is pointing at our struct sitting in memory, and that struct is existing at some particular RAM address. So when we write ampersand Jim, we say, give me access to the memory address that this struct is sitting at. And so for example, it might be say 0001. We take that value and then we assign it to Jim pointer. So now this Jim pointer variable that we just introduced into our application is not pointing, or it's not a reference directly to the struct. Instead, it's a reference to the memory address that the struct exists at. If we were to now print out the value of Jim pointer, we would probably see some type of memory address like 0x0abcd123. So Jim pointer is now pointing directly at this space in memory. Now with that in mind, let's talk about the other operator that we just saw as well. So that star operator. So whenever we use the star operator, we place the star and then a memory address or a pointer. Whenever we do that, we are saying, take this memory address and give me the value that exists at that memory address. So down inside of our update name function right here, we had said star pointer to person. Pointer to person is the memory address that Jim exists at. And so by saying star pointer to person, we are saying, here's the pointer. I don't want to look at the memory address anymore. Instead, give me direct access to whatever this thing or whatever value is actually sitting here. And so star Jim pointer turns into the actual struct of type person. So with those two operators in mind and understanding exactly what they do, let's now walk through our code and see if we can't figure out exactly what's going on. Okay, so right here on line 1, we first start off by taking the Jim variable. Remember, Jim is a reference to the struct in memory, the actual value of the struct. We use the ampersand operator. When we do that, we turn ampersand Jim into a memory address or a pointer. And then we assign that value to Jim pointer. Next, we call Jim pointer.update name. Now notice, and this is really critical, notice how we changed the receiver type here to be star person. You can read this right here as being a pointer that points at a person. Now one thing I want to point out, and this is really critical to understand, and this is probably one of the most confusing things about pointers in Go, is I just told you 2 seconds ago that whenever we place star and then a pointer, that turns that into a value. So this right here gets turned into a value, right? Like I just said that 2 seconds ago. But now I'm also telling you that star person right here is saying a type of pointer that points at a person. And so this is a really important distinction that I want to take a lot of time to really drill home. Okay, so this is probably, in my opinion, one of the most confusing things about pointers is that when we see a star in front of a type, it means something completely different than when we see a star in front of an actual pointer. So let's break these both down and figure out what the difference is between the two. So in the receiver, we said that pointer to person is a value of type star person. Whenever you see a star and then anything, basically any word whatsoever, in a place where a type is supposed to be, and remember in a receiver we always put the value and then the type that it is. So whenever you see a star where a type should be, that means that this is a description of a type. we are looking for a pointer to a person. So in this case, the star right here really should not probably be thought of strictly as an operator, like we were saying that it was before. Remember, we were just saying 2 seconds ago that star pointer is an operator that says, give me the value this memory address is pointing at. But when we see that star in front of an actual type, that is a type description, and it means that this update name function can only be called with the receiver of a pointer to a person. Okay, so I'm hopefully this is making sense when I'm trying to clarify that this really is a confusing topic, and hopefully the distinction between these two is making sense. So this is specifying that we want a type of pointer to a person. This is an actual operator that takes this pointer and turns it into an actual value. Okay, so let's flip back over to our code and keep going through. So we have the update name function, which can be called with any receiver of type pointer to person, which is exactly what Jim pointer is. So we call Jim pointer.update name. This Jim pointer right here, or this memory address, is then passed into this function as pointer to person. So you can imagine Jim pointer and pointer to person are the exact same thing right now. So then inside the function, we say star pointer to person. So remember what star and then an actual pointer means. It says take this memory address pointer to person and turn it into an actual value. So this little parenthesis block right here, this thing right here, gets turned into the actual Jim person that is sitting in memory. So we get back this struct right here that's sitting in memory. We then reference its first name property, and we update its first name property to be Jimmy, or whatever new first name is. Okay, so that's kind of a walkthrough number 1 here. And if it's confusing, I gotta tell you, that is completely okay. Nobody has ever learned pointers without hearing about them before in like the very first time they were told about them. Nobody has ever understood pointers from the get-go. And if you have, well, congratulations to you, I guess is the best thing I can say. So if this is confusing, that's totally fine. And we're gonna have a lot of exercises to really drill home exactly what's going on here. Now, before we move on, there's a couple points I really want to emphasize. Okay, so here's point number 1. First off, when we think about our variables here and everything that's going on with that struct right now, we are really working with 2 different types of variables. One variable is containing things that point at an address. So that would be like our actual pointer, our Jim pointer right here. This is a memory address. And then on the other hand, we have variables that produce an actual value, and that would be like Jim right here. So Jim is a value. Now, when we start thinking about addresses and how they relate to the values that they are contained within, remember that's why we are using that star and ampersand operator. So here's the rules. Here's the rule to really remember. If you have an address, you can turn that address into a value by saying star and then the address or the pointer. If you have a value, you can turn that into an address by writing ampersand value. And so that's exactly what we just saw in our code snippet right here. Right here, we have a value. We turn it into a memory address or a pointer by writing ampersand Jim. And then later on, here's that same exact pointer or that same exact memory address, and we turn it back into a value by writing star and then the pointer. So that's big reminder number 1. And then big reminder number 2 is understanding the difference between when we use that star thing in front of a type or in front of a memory address. So again, whenever you see the star at a location where normally we would specify a type, that means, hey, we are looking for a type that is a pointer to a person, a pointer to a person. That's what this pointer to person variable should be. So in this case, the star should not really be thought of as an operator. It's only when we have an actual memory address or an actual pointer right here that the star operator turns that back into a value. Okay, so with all that in mind, that's kind of like iteration number 1 through pointers. Hopefully it's not too bad, because I do have some bad news. This is kind of like revision 1 of pointers, and unfortunately in Go, there's actually a couple of edge cases that we really need to be aware of. So let's take a quick break. We're going to come back in the next section. We're We're going to do a little bit of code cleanup here, and I want to talk about some kind of, one little addition or two. And then we'll very quickly talk about one of the big edge cases around pointers and how they're treated in Go. So quick break, and we'll follow up in the next section.